Hello everyone, I am Casey the Gamer, and it's time for another game review. This time we are going on another adventure with Simon Belmont as he tries to put a stop to Dracula once again in Castlevania II, Simon's Quest for the NES. Castlevania II Simon's Quest was developed by Konami and released on August 28, 1987 in Japan, and in November 1988 in North America. I had never played this game before this review. It's not one that I had growing up, but I have heard of its reputation over the years, and I knew it was different than the original. Well, now I have played and beaten it, so let's talk about it. There are spoilers ahead for the story of the game. Castlevania II Simon's Quest takes place 7 years after the events of the first game. Simon is told by a young woman that he was cursed by Dracula during their battle, and he doesn't have long to live. Dracula's body was split into 5 pieces, and Simon must collect them and bring them to the ruins of Dracula's castle. Once there, he is supposed to resurrect Dracula and then seal and defeat him. Simon adventures through the various towns, battling monsters and collecting the pieces of Dracula. The pieces include Dracula's rib, heart, eyeball, nail, and ring. Now, I'm a little confused here. I would have thought that Dracula's head would have also been on the list, since Simon sent that flying off of his body in the first game. Anyway, Simon collects the pieces of Dracula and has a battle with Death and Camilla or Carmilla, whichever. After obtaining the pieces and defeating them, Simon returns to the ruins of Dracula's castle and revives him. Simon battles and easily defeats Dracula once again. With Dracula defeated, you are presented with one of 3 endings, depending on how long it took you to beat the game. If you take 15 or more in-game days to beat the game, you get the bad ending, where Simon dies from the curse almost immediately after the battle with Dracula. But hey, at least peace has been restored. The normal ending is if you beat the game between 8 and 14 in-game days. Simon is visiting Dracula's grave, and the game says that Simon couldn't survive his fatal wounds from the fight with Dracula, despite being right there in the ending screen looking like he's just fine. And the good ending is from beating the game in 7 in-game days or less, and has Simon once again at Dracula's grave, and everything is fine until Simon walks away, and the grave crumbles, and a hand emerges from the ground. So, a lot of the gameplay does stay true to the typical Castlevania formula. Simon still struts around with his trusty vampire killer whip. So, you still strut, jump, and use the whip to deal with enemies. Typical Castlevania. Nothing wrong there. And typical of Castlevania again, is the knockback is still here in full force. Here's where things are different. Castlevania II is not stage-based. It's a big interconnected world, and more of a Metroidvania than a classic Castlevania title, which I do think it's cool to see them try this so early on. But there's no map, and it's really easy to get lost, and the villagers you can talk to are cryptic as hell, so they're not always the most helpful. And just some of the things you have to do in order to proceed aren't communicated the best. For example, having to use a particular crystal in a particular spot, and crouching to reveal the path, or getting transported to someplace else via a tornado, or even having to use a particular piece of Dracula to get the ferryman to take you somewhere else. So while you're in the towns, you can buy stuff from people. Things like sub-weapons, like the holy water or the dagger. You're also able to buy whip upgrades, which I love. The sub-weapons in the game are the dagger, the silver knife, the gold knife, the sacred flame, holy water, the diamond, garlic, and the laurel. The laurel isn't really a sub-weapon, but more of a sub-item that makes you invincible for a certain amount of time. And I never went through the trouble of finding the diamond in my playthrough, so I don't know what to think of it. But I did love the gold knife, the holy water, and the sacred fire the most. They were very helpful. As for the whip, you start with the standard leather whip, and you can upgrade it to the thorn whip, the chain whip, the morning star, and finally, the flame whip. In order to get the flame whip, you must have the morning star upgrade. So some of the sub-weapons have to be bought, and some of them you find. All of the whip upgrades, with the exception of the flame whip, also have to be bought. In Simon's Quest, hearts are used as currency, in addition to being used as weapon ammo. Some of the items can get a little pricey, so sometimes you might have to grind for some hearts. Also, while you're in town, you can head to the church and refill your health, which is very nice. One of the really annoying things in this game is the day and night cycle. The transition box appears and says, "What a terrible night for a curse." And then it's nighttime. And there are more enemies, they're stronger, and the towns are also crawling with enemies, and you can't enter any of the buildings, so you just have to wait it out. I guess it's a good time to do some farming at that point. In addition to the sub-weapons and the whip upgrades, Simon can also level up. I wasn't quite sure what triggered it, but after fighting and collecting hearts, I would level up, which fills up your health bar and increases the size of it. It definitely happened at some very dire moments, so that was nice. So your goal is to head to the mansions around the area and collect a piece of Dracula from each one. The mansion stages aren't too bad overall, and they're typically pretty straightforward. There is a merchant in each one who will sell you an oak stake. You need to buy this in order to obtain the Dracula part there. And each part of Dracula has a different effect. I typically just left the rib equipped, as that gave me a shield to deflect projectiles. But you'll need to swap to another one in order for the ferryman to take you to a different mansion. So Castlevania II doesn't feature very many bosses. There's 3 in total. There is Death, who you don't even have to fight at all. You can literally just walk right past him to go get the piece of Dracula. However, beating him does give you the gold knife, which is pretty good. Camilla you do actually have to beat in order to get the Holy Cross, which is an item you need to enter Dracula's castle. And then of course there is Dracula himself. All of these bosses are super easy. I didn't have trouble with any of them, especially when compared to the last game. The bosses in this game are a damn joke. With Dracula defeated, you have beaten the game. And I mean, it's alright. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I enjoyed the whip upgrades a lot. They were really cool. And the standard platforming and fighting enemies was just fine. But a lot of the cryptic crap and the lame bosses and the day and night cycle just kind of dragged the experience down for me. The game itself can still be very difficult like the previous one, due to the enemies and the knockback and misjudging the distance on certain jumps. But if you lose all of your lives and hit continue, you start right back where you were with all of your upgrades, only losing any hearts you had collected. I'm not 100% sure if the game has infinite continues, but I did game over a few times and didn't have any issues. The graphics are pretty good overall. It's got those wonderful 8-bit pixel art graphics. Simon looks great, and the enemies and the backgrounds also look great. Death's design is just fine. Camilla's design is literally just a head or a face or whatever. And Dracula just looks like a supersized version of Death. Not really a great design. But everything else looks great. The sound effects are great. Typical Castlevania NES sound effects. No complaints at all. I feel like I go pretty easy on the sound effects in most games, but really you gotta try hard to mess those up. And the music. Well, one of the best things that Castlevania II did for the franchise was give us Bloody Tears. Such a good song, and one of my favorites in the franchise. And overall, the rest of the soundtrack is great as well. However, the song called Monster Dance kinda got on my nerves. It's the song that plays during the nighttime segments. And overall, it's fine. I guess I just got tired of hearing it. So that's Castlevania II, Simon's Quest. It's an alright game. It's not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be when I started it. However, there are far better entries in the Castlevania series for you to play, classic style or Metroidvania style. That being said, I really do applaud them for trying a Metroidvania style Castlevania so early on. They just didn't get it quite right this time, but they definitely will later. So with the lame bosses and the cryptic messages and all that, I say that if you're a big Castlevania fan, or if you're just really curious, give the game a shot. But I definitely recommend other Castlevania games over this one. When I jump back into the Castlevania series, it's time for Castlevania III, Dracula's Curse. Another first for me. Thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And if you want to see more of me, you can catch me streaming all kinds of games over on my Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/CaseyTheGamer91. And I also have a Patreon where you can get perks like early video access and some other pretty cool stuff. And that is patreon.com/CaseyTheGamer91. You can find both of those links and all of my other links in the description below. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I hope to catch you next time. Peace out.